Hello, everyone. We are back on the Stogie Lads podcast with another interview special. One of the biggest names in the cigar industry is with us today, namely Pete Johnson of Tatuaje Cigars. We're very honored to have him on, and it's going to be a great conversation. He's obviously one of the most present people now in the cigar industry. He's very well respected, and people like him a lot. So it's going to be great to have a chat with him. And because of that fact, we are not going to do so much as a cover profile of who he is or just his career. We wanted to go more specific questions and just pick his mind a little bit, since he's got that extreme wisdom that you only can get from many years within the industry.
Yeah, we wanted to get into more of the nitty gritty instead of asking the same old questions he's answered time and time again. So if you have no idea who he is and you want to get a little better understanding of the Tatuaje brand, maybe you haven't heard of it, I'd be very surprised if you like cigars and haven't even heard of Tatuaje though. You can check out some of the many other interviews. He's done interviews on Cigar Aficionado and stuff like that, so you can read that quickly if you want before. But that being said, he is the brand owner, creator of Tatuaje Cigars, one of the world's biggest cigar brands at this point. Mm-hmm. One of the absolute biggest boutique brands, if not the biggest, boutique brand. He really kind of disrupted the cigar industry by making a smaller boutique brand when the huge names were really dominating. And he did amazingly well. And his track record, we're going to end it before we cut to the interview by just saying, because I think this speaks for itself. He's had a top 25 cigar of the year on Cigar Aficionado, obviously the most well-known prestigious ranking. He's had one entry at least every single year except for 2016. So every single year, that consistency is kind of mind-blowing.
Exactly. Since the start from 2003, then when Tatuaje was started. So yeah. I think that pretty much speaks for itself. And
let's cut to it now. Enjoy the interview. We certainly enjoyed it a lot recording it. And we'll see you guys in a second. All right, guys. One of our most anticipated guests ever, probably the biggest we've had in just the cigar industry since. Mr. Pete Johnson of Tatuaje Cigars, thank you so much for giving us the time and your presence here today.
No, thanks for having me on, guys. I've been looking forward to this. After our good friend Aaron Sigmund mentioned you guys, it made sense that I needed to come on and visit.
Very good. Yes, a huge thanks to Sigmund as well for connecting us with you.
Yeah, he pushed it. He pushed it pretty hard. He goes, you got to talk to these guys. They're really good dudes. Like,
really,
I'm doing a thing with. Yeah, no, he actually went pretty heavy on it. I'm have him hit me up. So it worked out great.
we owe him a lot then. Wow. But yeah, lad, do you want to start it off, Ruben?
Absolutely.
Beginning questions.
Just want to say that first and foremost, you have this amazing backstory, and like we chatted about in the first few seconds here, we don't want to get into all the things that are out there already. There's certainly a lot of information for everyone to read up on you about, but obviously the world of making cigars is an art, and of itself is very creative. So we just want to hear a bit about your insights in, just give you the floor here a bit about telling us what Tatuaje is in general and what it is to you.
Yeah, Tatuaje as a whole, again, I had a dream. I've been in the cigar business now for 29 years, but I never owned anything in the cigar business until 19 years ago. And I always had that dream of having a brand with my name on it and guiding the way it was going to be made and guiding the flavor profile, kind of like the way I used to write songs when I was younger with my bandmates. It was very similar. I wanted to be involved in the process. Of course, it's a little different for a cigar brand owner compared to a cigar maker.
Yeah.
I'm a cigar brand owner. I call myself a cigar designer. I actually cut, I pick out the materials, I make the patterns, and I have professionals sew it up for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to claim that I sit at a rolling table. I'm not going to claim that I go into the farm and pick tobacco leaves. There's there's other people that do that, and I thank them for doing it great, because they give me the ability to play in a giant playground instead of doing all the hard work that they do. So what is Tatuaje? I mean, that's essentially it. We're a fashion house. We are a brand company that again does everything that I just said. We go to the best factories in the world to find the best items to put our names on them, and we work closely with those factories to make sure we have the best product. Obviously, with the Garcias, it's a little different. I'm part of the family, so it's it's a little bit more cohesive. I mean, it's always been that way though, because even since day one, I didn't blend the first cigar. Pepin Garcia blended the first cigar for Tatuaje, and he blended it to my palate. He sensed what I was looking for through a conversation, and within a moment, he instantly rolled, a cigar that I thought was dead on to what I was looking for. So, I mean, that was kind of like a roundabout way to get to your question, but
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
I never claimed to be a cigar maker, because I have to thank great people who know how to make cigars. I just am well versed on the industry, well versed on tobacco, and understand what is good and what's not. I have this question, or this debate with my friends a lot, because they go into and you might do this too, and I don't, throw any shade at it. A lot of people go into the whole like, oh, I get these notes and these notes and these notes. I used to do that with wine a lot.
Oh yeah.
And me and my friend Dan, who works with me for Surrogates Cigars, we used to do that a lot. We used to sit in a room and, swirl glasses of wine and smell it and go, okay, yeah, we're getting this, this, and this. And, the older you get, you just realize it better be good or it's not good. So we have a very simple approach, or at least I do.
Right.
If I taste something remotely bad in a cigar, I pitch it and I move on to the next. If we're sampling something in the factory that's new that we put together, if I taste it and there's something wrong with it, I go straight back to the chief of production. I tell them, okay, there's a Viso in here that's causing a problem, or there's a Lajero that's causing a problem, or one of the binders that are causing the problem. So we're very direct and to the point. We don't sit down and go, okay, we're getting these chocolate notes and we're getting these vanilla notes and we're getting these pepper notes, because we want to make sure we have all those, because we think the consumers are going to love it. At the end of the day, these cigars have to be made for us first, because if we don't love them, then we can't rightfully sell them to anybody.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's our biggest philosophy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the quote that I heard in one of the interviews with that, if you're making a cigar that everyone's going to love, or that everyone's going to like, you're never going to make a cigar that someone's going to love. And like, that's really sounds like that kind of philosophy. Yeah. And very binary scale, it's good or bad. And it's perfectionism. I like
that. there's you have to have a comfort zone. But there are flaws in cigars that you will instantly pick out. And that's just not acceptable. So you have to find a way to fix those flaws. And luckily, with the Garcia family and all the tobacco that they have to work with, it's easy to correct those flaws and take that other tobacco and trash it.
So I wanted to ask about something that I've been dying to know a little bit, because Ruben and I, we live in Sweden, obviously, so we have a good selection of cigars from the whole world, and easily attainable Cuban cigars compared to some people in the States. But like, what really struck me when I was really digging into you is that you're very verbal about your sort of love for Cuba and Cuban cigars and all that stuff, which to be honest, I don't really see in a lot of other cigar makers. I feel like some people hold that back publicly a little bit because they're making non-Cubans. But I just wanted to, know a little bit more about your relationship with Cuba. Obviously, you are in a family, like you say, of Cubans,
Yeah.
but also like that impact of Cuba on you and your journey starting up with cigars.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Cuba's always been the wheel. That's where it all started. So you can't like some people say, like some car makers cannot ignore Ford.
All right.
As much as, Ford might put out some crappy cars here and there, they can't ignore, the history of Ford.
The impact, yeah.
I mean, there were other cars around before him, I'm sure, but, that was a big breaking point for car making. When it came to cigars, it's always been Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, nowadays, like I smoke Cuban cigars. I prefer to smoke Cuban cigars that are made at home by custom rollers,
right.
because I feel like there's some support going back to those people directly. Because of my family that I'm part of, and because of what I've learned, in the history of the island and what's happened over there, I refuse to buy a production cigar from Cuba.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
People give them to me all the time, and I'll smoke them with the band off, and I'll give my opinion. But I won't seek out a box of production cigars anymore. I used to be all over it. That there was, Cuba being a mystical place for a guy, in the United States, because technically it's the forbidden fruit that we can't have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though we all got it, there was still that one thing that was like, oh my God, we have illegal stuff, so that
you were
made
part
it
of
even
that
cooler.
little too, right?
That
I heard that.
Yeah, that made it even cooler, because like we couldn't have it, or we weren't supposed to have it. You weren't allowed to bring it across borders, stuff like that. So I think that's really what hit home for a lot of us, is like, okay, we can't have it, so it makes it even better. I will tell you that smoking Cuban cigars in the late 80s and early 90s, though, were like heaven compared to what they are now.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I don't get that reminiscent quality to those days unless I'm smoking a custom roll from one of the rollers.
Very interesting.
That's the only time I get that flavor profile, and I'm searching for it. Trust me, like every time someone gives me one, I smoke it, and I'm hoping it tastes like a cigar from 1992. So it doesn't happen all the time. Every once in a while, I'm like, okay, they're doing things better, and it's nice to see, because again, you can't ignore the history of it.
Yeah.
But it's a battle for me, because I obviously I love the history of the cigars. I want to make something like a new version of Cuba for the market. I want to come as close to it as possible without putting a H. Upman band or a Monte Cristo band, or actually using their trademarks. Luckily, I've been able to buy over the years, not buy, but acquire multiple old Cuban brand names that went defunct.
Right. Yeah.
When Castro took over, these brands were kind of already off the market. So I was able to pick up a lot of those. I went down the rabbit hole pretty heavy early on with Cuban trademarks. And I just started registering everything I saw that looked cool.
Really?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Wow. No, I love that too.
Luckily, I found a lot of brands that had artwork that I had access to. So I was able to find my friend Albert Montserrat, who owns a place called Cigar Rings, which they manufacture bands and paper products for cigars. He has a huge collection of small factory bands and paper products from Cuba.
Cool.
So you go through his books and you can find all those brand names. It actually came up in a conversation early on when I started working with them, because I sent them a trademark. I said, hey, or not a trademark, but a band. I said, I need any paperwork, information that you have on a brand called La Riqueza. It means the wealth or the riches.
Right.
And his assistant got back to me and said, Pete, that's a trademark name. I don't think we can produce it. I go, no, I own the trademark.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
So they're like, oh shit, since you own it, yeah, here's all the bands. And they sent me like 7 or 8 bands and vistas from the boxes. So it was actually really easy to utilize those products and come up with something cool that was reminiscent to old Cuba.
Wow. Yeah, you can really see it in some of those bands. Go ahead, lad. I saw you wanted to ask something. I'm not going to cut you off anymore.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because like you can see quite a lot around on the internet as Tatuaje being described as Cuban-esque, and thank you for that answer. But like, have there been any ideas of blends that you've that might never come to fruition, really, that you really wanted to, that you wished that you could have done?
Yeah, I've said this a lot in interviews, but the luxury that we have as cigar, brand owners or makers, whatever, if we can't settle on a blend, we just don't make it. We move on to the next one, right?
Okay.
Brand names, I've utilized all the brand names that I've wanted to use pretty much.
Yeah.
But when it came to the cigars, there's only been a few times where I've looked at it and said, yeah, I'm not 100% on this.
Okay.
So I just skipped it. This was just like an addition to a project that I was already doing. And I just couldn't come up with the blend that I was super in love with. And again, I have that luxury of just saying, I won't do it.
Yeah.
So it's easy to skip.
I love the fact that the answer isn't, because I didn't think it would do well on the market or something like that. Like you really are just making what you want. That's awesome.
No, that's 100% the truth, is that we make it for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always the joke. It's like, these cigars are made for us. The bonus is when actually other people like them too.
Yeah.
And that's the dead honest truth, because you can't go into anything that you're doing thinking I'm going to make something for a market, because if no one wants it, then you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
So you better love it, right?
No, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. Worst case scenario, you just have tons of cigars that you get to smoke if none of them sell. So that's good. I wanted to touch on a little thing that we sort of discussed before beginning the recording here. I mean, you have this love of wine, and we talked a little bit about how there are a lot of similarities, right? But you, with the La Vérité series, the Truth series, you wanted to bring something that's not really done that much in cigars, but that is done all the time in wine, pretty much, right? Like the whole using one single vintage from one plantation. What are the pros? What are the cons of that? And like, just why isn't it more common? Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you remember that cigar that I was talking about where I couldn't settle on the blend?
Yeah.
That was La Vérité.
Okay.
La Vérité, 2010. I had samples made. I brought them up to my friends. We sat down, we smoked them, and they all seemed to like them. And they even said, this will do really well. And I just, there was something wrong with it for me, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. I just never made it. So 2010 was completely scrapped. All the bands from the 2010 vintage I had to basically throw away, because I mean, they're still in inventory down in Nicaragua, but I'm not using them for anything unless I come up with
just
some
aging. Huh? Have you tried them again?
Some celebration.
Maybe they've aged to perfection.
No, I mean, a lot of them, just need a lot of time, but there was something I want to taste it early on too. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to taste the product and see its future. If you can't taste it when you take it off the bench, then you have an uphill battle, because now you're questioning, okay, maybe it'll be ready in 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've always kept samples of those projects. I don't know if I have, I'm sure I do, but I haven't looked to see if I have any samples of the 2010 anywhere.
Okay.
Because it was very small. It was a very small batch. 2018 was similar. I was going to put together La Verite, and I realized I didn't want to do it from the main farm, which is Estrella, which is the Garcia's first farm, because they only planted one crop, one tobacco seed on that farm, and I wanted a little bit more expression. So I decided to move to a different farm that had more seed varietals on it. And I ended up producing probably the mildest cigar I've ever smoked.
Oh, wow.
It was perfectly fine, but I don't think it had much going on. So I kind of put that to the side too. That was, I'll be honest, that was on our first attempt, and I really haven't revisited it because the cigar ended up smoking great. It was just like, wow, like this is too easy, like way too easy.
Yeah.
So time starts to pass and you start to forget about things too. And I just kind of put it to the side and never went back to it. So there's still a chance because we still have some of that tobacco laying around, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I just wanted to completely change lines now, because I wanted to ask something that has shown up a bit in your interviews, just about your Opus X tattoo. And I was wondering, because I didn't get really an answer anywhere, apart from like, why do you have that tattoo? Because I haven't found out like the connection between you and Fuente.
Well, everybody knows that I have sleeves, and I'll tell you, when I was first in the cigar business, and this goes back to 93 and 94, I met Carlito Fuente at a cigar store.
Oh.
And he happened in Los Angeles, California. And he happened to be, I was working already in the industry. He happened to be one of the nicest people ever. Like, he sat down, took time to talk to me.
Yeah,
and I became a fan of the family and the product. And I was buying a lot of their product, and Fuente was just becoming super hot, like in the early 90s. So they started becoming this thing. And I was with them when they launched the Grand Havana room. They came to the Grand Havana room in Beverly Hills when that opened up in 1995. They brought Opus X with them, which is the best part about this. They had Opus X with Don Carlos bands, because the Opus X bands weren't ready yet.
Right. Oh my God.
So because the Opus X bands weren't ready yet, they had them over at the Grand Havana room as the cigar they were passing out. And I became friendly with Cynthia and the old man and Carlito and Cynthia's husband at the time. Just good people. Like, they kind of brought me in like I was a nephew type of thing. And I think they saw my enthusiasm for the industry, and they kind of took to it. And I eventually went down to the Dominican Republic with them. Actually, so that's in 95 with the Grand Havana room. I was going to the Big Smoke in Boston. And of course, for my love of cigars, I decided I'm going to get the Opus X tattoo on my arm.
Damn.
And it was in a place that was kind of like right back here. So
yeah,
okay,
it's not completely perfectly visible, but this was like just as a thank you and like a homage to a family that I thought that really changed the cigar industry for me. And I thought the Opus X symbol, just the X, was just really cool looking.
Yeah, I agree.
So I walked into the Big Smoke in Boston, and I told Wayne, who was Cynthia's husband at the time, I said, Wayne, I have a problem with my arm. And I lifted up my shirt, and everybody, like, I remember the Newman family was there, Ernesto Correa was there, like anybody you can think of was in the room. And they all started asking me if I would tattoo their brand on my arms also.
Living billboard.
And I, of course, the joke went on for a while, and I said no, but it was just really a kind of homage to a family to thank them for being so genuine and nice to me growing up. Because when you're new in the cigar industry, you're hoping that you get acceptance. And that's why I always tell people, like, if someone walks into a store that you're working behind the counter and that person is new and asks a dumb question, don't laugh.
You're right. course.
Take him in the humidor and educate him and guide him through the process, because he'll come back.
Exactly.
If you laugh at the question and just, tell him he's stupid for asking that question, then they're probably going to, turn away from the industry and not want to be part of it, not want to be part of the culture. So
definitely.
Yeah, Fuentes, that was the biggest reason. And they've always been friendly to me, even since I started my brand. They were very welcoming to my new family, the Garcia family, when they came into the market. So, and Carlito, of course, is really big about family and tradition, and that's where we sit. So it was just part of, thank you. That's what it was.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that that the Fuentes are an inspiration to a lot of people, and we did a deep dive into them, and it was just going through their history and everything. It's so cool just having their presence being so big in the cigar industry as well, with such deep, great history.
Yeah, great history, actually.
No, we did an audio documentary on the podcast about them, because it was just such a cool story, and I don't think a lot of younger cigar smokers might know the whole story, because we didn't really, to be honest, before.
Well, I mean, they know Carlito, because you see Carlito everywhere.
Yeah,
if you're a cigar smoker, you know Carlito's image. I think the old man senior for me was still one of those guys, that I would get nervous around, because there's some iconic people in our industry. I'm very fortunate. My father-in-law is an icon in this industry.
Yeah,
I don't get nervous around my father-in-law. He's very easy to talk to.
That's good.
But we grew up together in this side of the business. I mean, obviously, they came in from Cuba shortly before I met them, and then we worked together since 2003. So their anniversary for their company is the same date that I started, because Tatuaje was the first cigar they ever rolled for production.
Exactly.
Even before their own. So it's easy to hang out with him, but when you'd walk in a room and you see Orlando Padron, Jose Orlando, or Carlos Senior, you kind of get a little nervous. Even trust me, even at 50 years old. I mean, unfortunately, they passed away when I was more like 45. But, But I mean, because you got to respect the elders. You got to respect where it all came from. There's Julio Oro is another guy that I always love just sitting down with and shooting the shit. I mean, there's been a lot of guys that have left us that I was very fortunate to talk to before they left, and you can't get those moments back. So for me, it's always been about respecting tradition, and that's why I go back to the Cuban culture and the Cuban history of cigars.
I was gonna ask another follow-up, because I also am kind of obsessed with the history, and I've always been a lover of history before I got into the cigars, but I love diving deep into the history. I've done mini documentaries on our YouTube on old dead Cuban cigar brands that have been dead for a long time. And I'm also just kind of nuts about that stuff. But I wanted to ask another thing about the whole the art and that kind of stuff, because before I really knew about the whole trademark situation and all that stuff, I remember seeing Tatuajes when I was maybe 18 or something, before I really knew about cigars. And I was so confused.
How old are you now?
23.
Oh, shit. Okay.
But before I really knew anything, I was kind of confused. The Cojonu band is the Limitada band, and the Veracruz band is the regional. Is that, is the intention to pay homage? Is there intention to kind of say a little bit F you to the Cuban?
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I'm a very simple packaging person. I don't go really crazy with the
I love the unvarnished boxes and that stuff
with the way everything looks, because I want the cigar to speak first. The band is a way to dress it up, but I don't want the band to tell people how good or bad it's going to be.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of times people smoke just for the band.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, the bands. I mean, this is the most elaborate band that we've done, which is the La Misión.
That's beautiful.
And we just decided we wanted something a little bit more, you know, beautiful and regal looking, and it ended up being great for the cigar because the cigar turned out amazing. So it works out perfect. But when it comes to Tatuaje, it's always been very simple banding. Yeah, I would say, like, I was just looking for a band to use for Kohonu, and that was sitting in front of me. I'm like, I'll just use a similar band. Yeah, so it could have been kind of lazy. I would say it's purely lazy, but okay. But first and foremost, lazy for sure. But because I didn't really care about the packaging, I cared about the product.
Okay,
and that was the first. And the problem is when you do it once. This is my biggest pet peeve in the industry. I've seen so many brands come into the market and they've changed their packaging like 6, 7, 8 times.
Yeah.
And it starts confusing people. And then, you know, it's like, okay, the one with the new band on it doesn't taste as good as the old one. I made that commitment since day one. If I'm going to start with something, I'm going to end with it. So those bands are with me for life.
Yeah.
Because I started with them and I didn't want to confuse people by taking them off.
That makes sense.
If I change those bands in any way, people would recognize and go, something's different, something's wrong with it. And honestly, nowadays there's a ton of companies in the United States, US, you know, marketed brands that use those same bands.
Yeah.
I just might have been the first guy to take a bite out of Cuba. But now, like, there's dozens of people that use the same band.
Yeah, and you showed us that La Mission from your more experimental arm, L'Atelier, and
yeah. Well, now it's all part of Tatuaje. There's no separation.
Yeah, but when it was started in 2012, right? Or
yeah,
around that. Yeah. So I want to ask, how does the process of that experimental arm that it was before, how did that process like differ from the more regular production lines?
Well, so we always, like with Atelier, it started because Pepin had showed me a particular tobacco seed varietal down in Nicaragua one day.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a certain like color to it that just looked reminiscent of Cohiba. Okay. And I was like, I don't have enough room to put more stuff under Tatuaje.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But I knew I wanted to bring in a few people that I trusted to the business. And I was already working with a buddy of mine named Sean Casper Johnson. Well, he goes by Casper, but Sean Johnson, no relation. I was working with him on a club that we have called Saints and Sinners. And then I was making a cigar for Dan Welsh, who owns a online store called New Havana Cigars. I was making him a couple surrogates. And then I wanted to bring my brother into the business because he had visited a couple trade shows and he was working an okay job in Maine, but I figured, you know, he was good at sales because when he was younger, he used to work for sales for Adidas. So I knew he could be in the sales game. So I brought the four of us together, and I think Dan said it perfectly where he said, you know, Tatuaje and everything you do under the Tatuaje portfolio is your solo act. And this is the band.
Oh, you know,
cool. So instead of going into a room by myself and playing mad scientist where I would come out and say, okay, this is going to be the cigar. We would sit down as a group and go through the blends and go through the process and go through the samples and finalize everything together. So it was truly awesome. Writing a song as a band instead of a solo career. Yeah. But it was you know, Sean actually eventually left to go work for Universal Music because that's what he's been doing all of his life. He's always been in the music game. Mm-hmm. He was a tour manager for like the Jonas Brothers and stuff like that at one time. Oh, wow. Yeah, so that's where the connection with the Jonas Brothers comes with us. But he he's now working for Universal Music. And when he left, I figured it was about time that we rolled Atelier into Tatuaje. And I still rely on Dan and my brother Casey to kind of get focus of the Atelier products, and a lot more working with them on the Tatuaje products too. Even though I still have that process of like, okay, I get the samples first, I smoke them first, and then if they're lucky, I'll share them with them, because a lot of times I'll smoke all of them before they get to them.
Good.
Yeah, so it's a great group of people to work with, because Dan and I have very similar palates. I mean, we're very in tune with, even though he smokes a lot more every day, we're kind of in tune with each other when it comes to what we like and what we don't like.
Okay, I wanted to a little bit in line with what you like and a little bit in line with that experimental thing. There's a lot of trends, obviously, in terms of like packaging and all that stuff that we discussed, but I think I get the sense that there's also a lot of trends in terms of what's hot in terms of like tobacco. Like Connecticut, like the broadleaf thing had kind of a big deal explosion for a while. I feel like, what do you think is hot right now? What do you think might get hot? And what do you like? Is there anything that you like that people might not really know that much about in terms of like tobaccos? I wanted to ask some nerdier questions as well.
Well, I mean, it's for me, I've always shifted in production because of necessity. So there's a lot of times where we've shifted while other people were still concentrating on certain leaves. We had to shift because we were running out of broadleaf at one time, and I needed something else to do that I wasn't going to use broadleaf on. So I shifted to San Andreas, and that became really hot for a while. Yeah. And then I switched to Sumatra for another project, and that became really hot for a while. But there was a time where I was actually about to release a whole Sumatra line, very much like my broadleaf line. And at the time, our supplier for Sumatra, which is out of Ecuador, the Oliva tobacco family, Gustavo, who works with them, he's like, "What are you going to do with what's your next project?" I said, "I'm going to do a Sumatra release, a big one." And this is years ago, and he straight up told me, he goes, "Don't do it."
Oh wow!
And I go, "Why?" He goes, "We're having trouble with the Sumatra. It kind of mutated itself, and it's not tasting like, traditional Sumatra."
Damn.
So I was able to get some samples of it. We tried it. I'm like, wow, it's not even close to what Sumatra is about. It almost tasted like Habano in a sense. And I was with another cigar manufacturer, a very well-respected manufacturer in the industry. And I said to him, I said, "Have you tried that Sumatra from Bolivia?" He goes, "Yeah, it's not good." I go, "I know, like, what the hell? Like, it doesn't taste like that." So I had to steer away from that. Right now, people are complaining about broadleaf. We're in a very secure spot with broadleaf. So you won't see us shifting away from broadleaf right now. We're going to be actually moving forward with a lot more broadleaf.
That's great news. Some of our followers have been saying more broadleaf, just about Tatuaje when we told them you were coming on. So that's good news to some, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll see more broadleaf coming up in the next few years. We obviously have some big releases for 2023 and our 20th anniversary.
Right.
Which will include broadleaf.
Nice.
But trends for me, I love Corojo shade grown. Absolutely.
Oh, really?
Love it. And I've had it in the past. Obviously, I've used it in the past. When we first started, that's what we were using, Corojo shade grown. But we started getting poorer and poorer quality of it, so we had to move to something else. And then we moved to another supplier of that leaf, and then we started getting less and less quality of that. So we moved to Habano, Ecuador. So in around 2006, we started shifting everything to Habano, Ecuador from Oliva. And this is when Habano, Ecuador, no one was really touching it. Like, no one really wanted it. But Pepina tried it. Jaime had tried it. They actually came to me and says, "We need you. We're not getting enough leaf from these other suppliers. We need you to shift to Habano, Ecuador. And the rule for me was wrap every one of my cigars in that new wrapper so I can taste them all.
Oh,
and
cool.
I'll let you know. And at the time we had a very small portfolio, so it was a lot easier.
Okay. Yeah.
But anything that had the Corojo on it before, I needed to taste it with the Habano.
Okay.
And I fell in love with it. I was like, and not only did it taste equally as good, but it also burned really great. The burn rate was beautiful. On the old Corojo we were using back in the early days, it was like asbestos, man. It wouldn't burn.
Really?
I mean, it tasted great, it smelled great, but you couldn't get it to burn. So it was one of those things where we eventually had to switch. And I was very vocal about it early on, making sure that people knew that I had switched to Habano, because I didn't want people thinking that it was still Corojo. So it's always, the Corojo thing has always been stuck in the back of my head. The Garcia started growing it multiple years ago, and I started falling in love with it all over again. There's something about it that's, it's got an inherent sweetness to it. It's kind of got a gamey quality to it too. So it's got that, those notes that you want to chew on, and the aroma just kind of sticks to you.
Nice.
So I love it. And every crop, the Garcias keep on growing. It gets better and better. And so we're able to make 100% Garcia grown tobacco cigars, which we love because we have full control over it.
Of course.
And you'll see a project coming out later this year called Veracruz Blue. So it's the Veracruz line, but with kind of like a rosado shade Colorado color to it, with that Corojo.
Oof.
Very happy about it.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, just this year as well, you were on the Cigar Aficionado Top 25 and have been so consistently.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that's escaped anyone. But we've
been fortunate. We actually missed 1 year. 2016, we did not make it.
Right,
unfortunately,
Instagram post on that.
Yeah.
But we've been able to get on there, and I think that the proof's in the product. You see a lot of repeats, which is awesome.
That's good.
So the repeats actually help because it shows consistency.
Yeah, that's almost
over the
impressive.
years. But I love that list is still the most important list in our industry. I wouldn't say that in the wine industry. Like in the wine industry, you have Parker, and you have Suckling, and you have Wine Spectator, and a few others, and they kind of compete with each other on who's got the more reputable list and the most popular one, the one that people follow.
Yeah.
When it comes to cigars, there's a lot of lists out there, but the one that people really follow is Aficionado.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. And that was actually one of the follower questions that we'll get to later. But since you mentioned it, or since I brought it up now, and you answered like how you assess the rankings, but can you just say like a few words while we're on the subject now about the Tatuaje Reserva K222?
Yeah, the blend, it's actually made in Miami, because we have two different versions. We have a broadleaf version, which is made in Nicaragua, but it will say broadleaf on the bottom of the Reserva band.
Nice.
This particular one was made in Miami. It's only made by one roller. We don't make a lot of them. The cigar was made in kind of like celebration of my dog's life. He had passed. The reason why it's called K222, his name was Kona, and he actually died at 2:22 p.m.
Oh, wow.
So the number 222, though, comes up everywhere for me. Like it kind of haunts me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like in the same day that it was on the top 25, when it got revealed, three things happened that day where 222 showed up.
That's nuts. And
like weird little things here and there. Like I'm actually looking at a property to potentially do kind of like a home office. And I decided to go down the rabbit hole last night and look at the public records of the property. And the original sales certificate of the property in 1978. The recording document number is 10222.
Oh my god. That's nuts.
My wife's one of her new credit cards, the CVV code was 222.
Oh, really?
And she actually pulled out that card the same day that it was on top 25. I mean, it's just it's weird shit. Like I picked up my phone to text my brother and Dan the other day after Tom Brady got sacked, and I realized that he got sacked at 222.
Oh, wow.
it's
these
just
constant little reminders.
That's nuts. Wow.
Yeah, it's everywhere for me. Like it truly is everywhere for me, because it's just so random, and you don't know why it happens. And I guess maybe you look for it more, but it's purely random. So back to the cigar, though. The cigar is actually a blend in between the Kohonu 03 and the J21 that are both made in Miami also.
Okay.
So I didn't want it as strong as the Kohonu, but not as light as the J21, even though they're super close anyways. I wanted it right in between.
Wow. Precision.
And it's the size, of course, is the historic size. It's, a Sig size, 5 7/8 by 52.
Nice. Okay, so another kind of I guess specific question, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit on a specific thing. Like rolling techniques and like triple capping and all that stuff, because like do you have any preferences? Like, do you prefer
it move a little bit because there's like this glare coming on me.
That's a beautiful background.
I prefer entubado. That's the preferred method in the factory. Triple capping obviously is the preferred method in the factory. The Garcias, since day one on every cigar that we make, has always been with 2 binders.
Okay.
So this was kind of a thing that Pepin kind of perfected in Cuba, where the way he positioned the 2 binders. It's not just about putting one binder on and then rolling another one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's about overlapping them in a certain way. And he's been doing that forever. So it's part of the tradition of the factory. So no matter what the quality of the cigar, when I say quality, no matter what the price point of the cigar, they all have double binders, which is kind of nice, because it adds to the structure of the cigar, the complexity, the way the burn rate. Obviously, if the wrapper pops off, you're never going to have a problem with the cigar exploding on you, which is nice. So it definitely helps with a lot of different things in the cigar. But I mean, I'm fortunate. I got to live my dream of wanting to have my own Cuban cigar, and I found what I believe is one of the best Cuban families in the world to make me as close to as possible.
Yeah. No, and I wanted to ask a sort of related question, because obviously they are just masters, right? The Garcia family are quite obviously masters, but there is like this great Opus X story I remember from when we researched them a bit. That one tobacconist that visited.
It looks like I'm at the beach now.
Yeah, no, it actually does look like a green
Not
screen.
jealous at all. Yeah, just here in dark Sweden, it's that's a beautiful background. But there was a tobacconist that visited them and basically like gave this like snarky comment to Carlito Fuente that like, oh, you guys just assemble a cigar, you don't make one. And then that kind of gave him the inspiration to make the Opus X series, to make it.
That was a big deal. Sorry, I'm getting my ashtray. That was a big deal for Carlito, and honestly, that probably held true with the Garcias, because in the early days, we relied on getting tobacco from people, and in 2007 they started growing their first crop on Estrella, which ended up being the 08 crop. That started changing everything in the family and in the factory. And that also changed Jaime's motivation to have more farms Same with Pepin. More farms. We need our tobacco because we can't rely on other people to get the tobacco. You know, at some time in anybody's business, someone's going to become jealous or vindictive of what you do. And honestly, over the years, I probably had jealousy towards new people coming in the industry too. Honestly, it's kind of stupid to do it, to have it, but it does motivate you to do better. So you push yourself to you know, do more and more creative things and push yourself to advance what you do. The problem is if it's the flip side, the other side, those people that you're buying tobacco from start becoming, you know, like, look at these guys, they're doing really well. Let's not give them as much tobacco.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll honestly say that's what happened to us.
Wow.
We started doing really well. We started making a lot of noise. People started questioning, like, how can they make such good cigars? And some of the suppliers started like going, well, we're out of that right now. So it now it's a necessity. You need to start having your own farms. You need to start growing your own tobacco. And there's not a stitch of filler and binder that the Garcias buy from anyone now. Everything that we buy, the family buys now, is actually wrappers from trusted suppliers, and that's what they do for a living. And these people have been close with us for forever, so we don't have to worry about them, you know, turning a blind eye on us or anything.
Yeah, that is a major part of it when you think about it. Like it in the end, it's a business as well, right? And you have competitors and stuff, so yeah, best getting your own crop. But when also in like researching you and a lot looking around the web, you're seen as a very traditionalist type as well. I guess if you can say that. I don't know if you agree yourself, maybe, but
no, I love history. I grew up.
Yeah.
You know, my parents loved, and they still do this. They love antiques, and they grew up. I grew up in the middle of paying attention to history and why history was so important to carry forward. So following traditions on a lot of things is very important for me. Even when I was playing around with wine in France, I followed a very simple path. I did turn tradition upside down a little bit with wine, but when it came to the processes, I let the people that knew how to do it process it the right way. So I would end up with great juice to work with.
Excellent.
But like I did this whole blend of wine where I literally took the region where it's from, and I turned the recipe upside down.
Oh,
and everybody's like, yeah, I flipped the blend completely. I went heavy Cab Franc and like a lower percentage of Merlot instead of the region, which is Saint-Emilion. It's high Merlot, a little bit of Cab Franc.
Yeah.
So I just went like this. And actually on the label, it says turning tradition upside down. So.
Yeah, I guess you can do that as well. And maybe that plays into your Monster series as well, because we wanted to know a bit about that, because there are these like super limited edition, crazy releases kind of sort of thing against the tradition. How do you feel about that series and that project?
You know, it's a fun series. Has obviously become like a thing for me.
Yeah.
It all started with a conversation between a buddy of mine. He was actually a cigar store owner in Boston, and he was a big sneakerhead. And he's like, you should do something that's like limited edition, you know, every year, like a seasonal release. And he pulled out a pair of Nikes with Frankenstein on them. I was like, oh, monsters. I go, that's an easy one. And within the first half hour that I, you know, popped that in my head, I was like, oh, I have like the next 8 years set up, like already.
Crazy.
Because it ended up being an easy theme. But when I did the first year, everybody that visited the factory was like, and when I say everybody, local people in Esteli would visit the factory. People that we either were getting tobacco from or suppliers like box suppliers and stuff like that. They're like, he wants what? like, what's he doing? He's putting it in a coffin. Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
He's
a little bit of
creative.
a surprise. It was a little bit of surprise for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It became my thing, which is great. I probably would have been upset if someone had done it before me. But no matter how awkward the boxes are, the cigar has to come first, and the cigars all are built off of the tradition. So
that's good.
Like, I don't do anything crazy with the blends. The blends are very, very classic and simple. I don't do anything like just completely nutso where people are like, oh, it's got 18, 12 different tobaccos.
Just the presentation. Yeah,
it's
the
really
bands are pretty simple. Like, they could be a lot more nuts if you wanted to go really out there, you know?
Well, it's always you want to, when it comes to monsters in general, I've always tried to be very ambiguous, because I do not want to get a letter from any, company that owns the rights to those monsters. Sure. So that's why they've always been called Frank and Drac and Face. Some things are old enough to where they're kind of public domain. So Jekyll and Hyde was easy. The Mummy, stuff like that. It's you try to keep some type of ambiguity, because you don't want to be completely blatant. I would say even moving forward, we're going to err even more on the side of caution, just because I think we've become kind of a target. So I want to make sure that we lean towards more of the safer side.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so that's because that like Ruben said a little bit, it is a bit untraditional, and I think the market is heading more and more towards, I mean, it's trending that way, at least from my point of view, that there's like the limited edition stuff is becoming more and more popular, and like almost the more obscure and small and like unorthodox, the better. Like you see, if you go through like Privada Cigar Club, for example, like there's just a lot of crazy stuff on there.
Yeah, so like
back in the day, sorry, go ahead.
No, so with Grand Kohonu, the Grand Kohonu we do, it's a 6.5 by 60. A buddy of mine asked me to do that, and I told him no. Like, he was a retailer of mine, a good friend of mine. He asked me, he goes, make me a big fat like 60 ring gauge. I go, nah, dude, that's not. I go, I follow the Cuban playbook, and that's not anything that Cuba's doing.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine brought me back a cigar from the island that was a 5 by 60 with a covered foot. Whoa. And I went back to, and this was in 2004, and I went back to the factory, and we happened to have a mold in the factory of a 60 ring gauge, but it was 6.5 by 60. I'm like, this is perfect, because I have the Kohonu, which is 6.5 by 52. I'll just do the Grand Kohonu at 6.5 by 60. But it was only because someone gave me a custom roll from Cuba, and I said, if they're going to start doing 60s, I want to beat them to the punch.
Good. Right. And now they're doing it.
Are they actually releasing them though? I think they're still like, custom rolls and stuff like that, right?
The Cohiba Majestuosos, I think that was like the 55th anniversary or something. I think that was 58 ring gauge.
58,
closer,
but it's not quite 60, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, they'll get there.
Close.
Yeah, they'll get there for sure. And meanwhile, I'm going backwards. We're making more and more smaller cigars.
I love that.
We like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we need that side as well, right?
We make probably more Lanceros or Leguito number ones than anybody in the industry.
Yeah, good.
Leguito number ones and number twos, that's kind of like our wheelhouse for a lot of projects. We try to include them in every line because we love them. And I think that the company has actually made people appreciate the size more. I think for us, I think we're getting a little bit more calmer as we go on. And there is a lot of creativity, and there's a lot of crazy things out there with brands and limited editions. But I think our limited editions moving forward are going to be based off of a lot of things from our past. So brands that we did or releases that we did as limited editions before, we're expanding those to have a broader reach, like the Cojete. I don't know if you saw the Cojetes just came back out. That's what I'm smoking now. It's a 4 by 50.
Nice.
Originally we did it in Habano, Then we did a small batch in Sumatra, and this last week we released Habano Sumatra and broadleaf in those versions, kind of like we did with the T110 last year.
Nice.
So you'll see more of that stuff coming up. I mean, obviously, we're still going to have a monster themed cigar.
Yeah, you got it.
It might not be blatant, but people will understand based on the shape of the box. So
interesting. Yeah, you own October, so that makes sense to keep renewing the lease on that.
It's tough. It's a tough one to give up for sure. But at the same time, like, you know, eventually I'm going to get tired of it, and eventually someone's going to want to jump into that spot.
Like with everything.
So,
no, I like that you're going back to your roots in several ways. I keep making slimmer cigars, and even though it's not maybe economically viable, please export to Sweden.
Then you'll have two regular buyers.
It's funny, man, because you know, Marevas and like Dahlias or Cervantes, those are my favorite sizes.
Yeah, the Lonsdale style.
For me, like a Mareva classic, you know, Monty 4 size.
Corona,
I love. For me, that's a gentleman's cigar, and I smoke a ton of them.
Yeah,
and a lot of
they're
times
so rare in the States.
I smoke a lot of them because some of them I make personally just for myself to smoke, and I don't release them. But I love that stuff because, again, it's the tradition part, and you kind of want to hold that history a little bit. I think some of, like we talked about, some of the movement that the industry is going in right now, and I think some parts are getting a little too crazy. That's why I decided to kind of slow down a little bit. And,
I like that.
You know, stick with the monster thing because I have to. And you know, I had an issue with Monster Energy for a while because they thought they could own, you know, the word monster in cigars.
The word monster.
Really?
So that's like, based on the trouble I had with that, that's something I have to keep on pushing forward on because it made no sense to me, and I want to kind of prove a point. So.
Yeah, maybe this year's version should be called Monster Energy, just to make it even more.
I won't do that. Never.
So we have, I mean, obviously a lot of our followers were hyped when they saw we were going to have you on. Do you have a couple minutes just to do a quick fire, just a few follower questions?
Absolutely.
A couple ones.
Awesome.
So I guess we can start with a simple one. Ben Stein is his username. He asked if the Escasas line will return soon. Ben Stein, I love it.
That's a character, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah. It was a character. Ben Stein, who played that role. Anyways, doesn't matter. You ever seen the movie Ferris Bueller?
Yeah.
Okay, you remember the teacher, Bueller? He kept on repeating Ferris Bueller's name in class. He was looking for Ferris Bueller. Well, he's the guy that played Ben Stein.
Oh, the actor is called Ben Stein. Oh, he's the... Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Anyway, so what was the question now?
Will the Escasas line return soon?
Yeah, so we have two different versions of Escasas. We have the luxury Escasas, which are made in Miami also, which are, you know, that was a super small production based off of, you know, kind of like the Cuban custom theme. And sorry, I'm lighting my cigar and I don't want to burn my finger, so I'm looking down at my hand.
No worries.
I can't see the flame because of the sun that's coming in. And the regular base Escasas line is going to show back up soon. We're trying to produce cigars in Miami now. The problem is shifting rollers here and there to concentrate on regular production. The Escasas has always been, it means scarce for a reason. You can only make so many of them because we don't have enough rollers here in Miami. So eventually they will come back because it's a line that I love making because I love smoking them because of that Corojo wrapper. So yes, the answer is yes, eventually.
Good. Okay, good. I think Ben Stein will
be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be happy with that. Yes, the next one we have Richie, who writes, with a highly ranked US brand, how are you handling larger demand and keeping quality?
Yeah, the actor's named Ben Stein, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Settled.
Settled. How are we handling it? We've been lucky. We've always been very, very into slow growth. We've obviously had hiccups over the years because of growing pains in the factory. But as far as a company goes, we've always been into moving up slowly instead of like just, oh, we're going to have this huge increase and then the next year we'll go down a ton. In 2021, we had a big increase, but I thought in 2021 we actually made some of our best cigars. So it didn't really affect us. If we could keep the level of what we did in 2021, I think we're in a good spot. I don't think we're going to end up having trouble with the growth. And again, Jaime and Pepin have made sure that we have a ton of tobacco to work with. Their rollers, have been working with them for a long time, so they're getting better and better at what they do. I don't foresee a problem, but you never know. I think we're in a good spot and we're moving in the right direction.
Love that. Yeah, and if you stay with making cigars that you yourself want to smoke, your quality will never go below that standard. So that helps.
Yeah. So we leave for Nicaragua on Sunday, and the first thing we have waiting for us are a bunch of blends we put together a couple weeks ago to make sure we had them ready to smoke when we're down there. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of times where we'll sit down and as soon as we light it up, we're like, I don't have to look any further. Because you kind of when you start understanding blends and blending and tobaccos, it's easy to go up and down from a base. And if you think about our base is Brown Label. That's always been our basis to everything, which is a very traditional Seco Viso Ligero. So it's easy to dissect it and find a different nuance of that, or go up in strength and find things like Fausto. So we've been very fortunate. I mean, yeah, there's some cigars you taste, you're like, oh, that's bad. And you just have to go back and let's try this, Viso instead of that piece.
All right. So just two more. This one might not have a good answer. There might not be an answer for this one, but Keegan asks, what's a cigar from one of your quote unquote competitors that you wish you could have part of the Tatuaje brand? Like, is there any cigars out there that you feel would fit in well?
Not really so much a cigar part of the brand, but there are a couple cigars outside that I'll enjoy here and there. I think there's a lot of great cigar makers right now, and honestly, I don't think the consumers are they're being treated really well right now. So you can pick a lot of them. But I always say that, like Dion Giolito from Illusione, he makes a cigar called Epernay.
I love it too, so much.
And could I recreate Epernay? Probably close, but not exact, because that's why I'm so honest about what goes into a cigar, because I know that no one can really copy what we do, but I also know that I can't copy what Dion's doing. I think that's his masterpiece. And I think that's one of those cigars that is really stood out over the last,
so good.
What is it, 15, 16 years that he's had it. That's one cigar that I would put at the top of that list. Maybe not per se have it in my line, but something that I'll smoke if someone gave me one.
Yeah,
not the best answer.
So good. No, that's a good answer. Yeah, no, you heard it here first. Bear hug,
is
hostile takeover, Tatuaje or buying Illusione. That's how.
I mean, I smoke a lot of other people's products, but I think more than anything, I'll smoke someone else's product and I'll look at the name of the cigar and go, wow, I wish I would have thought of that name first.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. So the name rather than the flavor, yeah.
But I know that I can create my own version of Epernay. It won't be Epernay exactly, but if I wanted to, I could probably create something along those levels and be happy with my version, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have the last follower question here from Tristan Drew, who writes, I notice a slight sweetness with all Tatuaje cigars. How do you achieve this?
Is that some secret?
No, there's no secret.
Do you believe it to be true yourself?
A slight sweetness, I think it's just balance. When you have perfect balance in a cigar, all those flavors come out. You get that sweetness. It depends on what he's talking about. If he's talking about broadleaf, it has an inherent sweetness to it already.
Yeah, true.
If you're talking about Corojo 99, similar also. We use a lot of Corojo fillers in our blends. I think it's really about balance more than anything. There's no secret sauce. We don't add pepper, you know, you know, we've had conversations with people who are like, oh, you guys got one of those guys in the back of the factory that dunks the tobacco in a vat. And we're like Drew said, no. We don't talk names. We're like, no, and the guy actually tried. He's like, for sure you have one, you just haven't seen it. I'm like, listen, man, like I've been in every square inch of that factory. I would see it. Like there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And
that's gotta be. Yeah.
I believe that, and this is the best part about Jaime and Pepin and their employees. They treat tobacco very simply. They do very traditional steps in the way they process, and they don't add anything to it. And when you let tobacco speak for itself, it's going to be magical, to where you could even make the worst blend possible and it will still smoke good. Like you could be completely untraditional in the way you put the cigar together and it will still taste good because the tobacco is processed properly and complete. That's a big key I think for our success and the Garcia success and all the clients that they make product for, is the tobacco is processed the right way.
That's good. No, I love that. I love the no bullshit attitude. Being truthful, being honest, open.
That's always been one of my things that I have a friend in the industry by the name of Jesus Fuego. He has a small brand still. And
Jay Fuego,
yeah, we've joked in the past, like we're going to go on a no bullshit tour because, you know, like I used to go into humidors and don't do this because it's not cool. But I used to go into humidors and I would see a cigar that looked like it had like a coloring on the wrapper.
Oh yeah.
And I would lick my finger and I would rub it on the wrapper. And if I came back with color, I call it the litmus test, right?
Oh my God.
If I came back with color, then I know that someone's cheating.
Yeah.
And it always bugged me because I'm like, well, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And not every dark cigar is always going to be the same darkness, you know? Not every cigar is going to be the same shade that you always wanted in. Do we want consistency? Absolutely. But it goes back to the comfort zone of colors even, where you have to be in that range of color. Otherwise, you know, the consumers are going to be like, well, it's a different cigar. It's a lighter color. So if I start shifting towards another color, it's a new line within Tatuaje. So that's kind of where Escasas comes in, because we particularly took the regular brown label cigar in Miami, purposely put a different shade of that original wrapper on that cigar. So it's the same blend. It's just a different color gradient.
Oh,
okay.
And it's a completely different cigar because the priming of the leaf will actually change the cigar drastically. So it's a nice experiment and a teaching tool when you give someone the same exact blend and you just picked the wrappers from two different parts of the plant.
Wow. That's fascinating.
That's it.
Yeah. Wow. God, I could sit here literally all day, but we got to respect the fact that, I mean, I can't believe you took this time even out of your day to be with us here. It's incredibly kind.
Well, I'll tell you a secret.
Amazing. Yeah.
My wife said to me yesterday, she goes, "When did you plan this?" I told her a while ago. She goes, you know, we had a dental appointment today. I go,
Oh, damn.
oh. I go, oh, I feel horrible. I didn't want to go to the dentist.
Okay.
No, but I'll be honest. I have a CRA meeting at 2:30, so I have a little bit of time.
Okay.
So it's only 1:16 here in Miami.
Okay.
Nice.
We can. Do you have anything else, lad?
I mean, not specifically prepared. Like a question. I've really appreciated all your answers to our questions here, and yeah, I mean, a lot of the things about your background and stuff we've obviously looked into and heard your story. Okay, one thing I can ask, if we go back to the really beginning, you were
Let's start over.
Yeah, no, but just since we have the time, just your first entry with cigars, really.
Well, first entry was a consumer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you go from the consumer to, because then you worked at the Grand Havana room in Beverly Hills.
Yeah, Grand Havana actually came later.
Yeah.
My first entry was a place called Gus's Smoke Shop.
Right. Yeah.
And this is the odd part of my life. I was a musician. I didn't have a job. I got a part-time job as a I don't know, assistant manager / floater / security guard. And I'm not a big guy. There's other guys that do this, but I worked at a burlesque club.
Okay. Interesting.
And I was like I worked the door a lot. So when people would walk through the door, the cool thing about the job, I could actually smoke cigars.
Yeah.
So I would sit at the door and I would smoke cigars. And I was kind of very frequently going to different stores around the town. In Sherman Oaks, California, there was a place called Cigar Warehouse, a place called Gus's Smoke Shop that I kind of concentrated on. And they were my two favorite stores that I would go to. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of intimidated by one over the other. There's my wife. I saw you back there. And so I was about to go ask the guys from Cigar Warehouse if I could have an apprentice job, because I really loved cigars and I really wanted to learn about the industry, because there was a brief period that I was thinking about moving back to my home state of Maine, up in the Northeast, to open up a cigar store. And I went to Gus's Smoke Shop, and I had a couple guys there that I would talk to all the time, and they were like the sales guys that would help me out every time I was going there. And one guy named Dennis Spike, great dude, he just took to me, and he loved teaching me about cigars.
Nice.
And also pipes and stuff like that. He approached me and said, "Hey, do you think you want a part-time job?" So this was right before I went up the street to Cigar Warehouse. Okay. They asked me first. Yeah. And I started working on Sundays, and my job was literally to mix pipe tobacco for the store.
Right.
Because they had their own house blends for the store, and I would have to sit there and mix the tobacco for their clients. And you get your hands dirty for sure. But that was my first introduction into the cigar business. But within 6 months, I had a full-time job there. And within 6 months, the owner put me at the register, because somehow I was able to memorize every price point of every cigar in the humidor. Because I went deep into the rabbit hole of like knowing exactly how a cigar from Honduras smelled, and how a cigar from Nicaragua smelled, and how a cigar from the Dominican Republic smelled, and how obviously Cuban cigars smelled. So I became one of these people in Los Angeles where people would come to me and say, "Hey, can you tell me about this cigar?" And they'd give me a cigar with no band on it. And I would have to tell them what it was. And a lot of times it was, I knew the Cuban portfolio really well, like really well, to where it was easy for me to look at a cigar just based off of the shade of the wrapper and the shape, and tell you, oh, that's that's a San Cristobal La Punta. You know, that's easy. And they're like, well, how do you know it's not a Boulevard Bellicoso Fino? I go, because of the shade of the wrapper.
That is
like, I didn't even have to
skill.
taste it. So I've probably lost a lot of that skill over the years because I don't follow the Cuban shit as much.
Yeah.
If someone gave me if someone gave me a traditional everyday production Cuban cigar, I'd probably come close to what it is. But it was also being educated by guys like George Brightman. We talked about him earlier.
Right.
It was also friends with Aaron Sigmund. Brightman was one of those guys that would give me cigars all the time without a band. And he's like, tell me what it is. Just straight up. Tell me what it is. So I'd have to go through looking at it and, you know, dissecting it with my eyes first. And then, you know, looking at the ring gauge, looking at the, you know, the shape, and then eventually lighting it up and going, okay, yeah, that's this.
Damn, that's so cool.
Blind tasting at its best. But yeah, I probably lost a lot of that because
yeah. Makes sense.
Someone tried to blind taste me with one of my cigars one time. I was like,
really?
Like, this is obvious where it comes from.
Laughable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my
introduction. Yeah.
To cigars. Gus's Smoke Shop. I eventually moved to a place called the Big Easy in Studio City, but opened up their store in Westwood, California, and that's where eventually the Grand Havana Room came to me and said, "Hey, we need someone to run our retail for us." So it was a journey. It was a quick journey.
Yeah.
But in 1996, I went to the Dominican Republic and visiting a bunch of factories and trying to find a factory that could make me a cigar. And coming back from that first trip going, I really have no clue what I'm looking for. Like, so I waited. I waited. I kind of gave up on the dream of making my own product until I had a conversation with my now father-in-law.
Yeah. And how did that first contact? Because like he was very famous in Cuba and all that, but you put each other on the board, or on the map, kind of in the US and all. So how was that?
I always have this thing. I always have this thing with people who were famous in Cuba. They usually were from Havana, and Pepin wasn't. Pepin was from the center of the island. I always say that he never became Havana famous, so not a lot of people knew about him. Like, I didn't know about him when he first came into the States. A friend of mine who was a sales rep for a big company said, "Hey, we have this guy coming in. If you still want to make a cigar, I think this guy could probably do it for you." And I was like, not really in the mindset to do it. And something had just happened in my life to where I was looking for something more. And it was actually my first dog died, so it was like really emotional. And I was looking for something to grab onto. And within a few minute conversation with Pepin, it was like clear that he knew exactly what I wanted to make for a cigar. I mean, I wanted what it was in his head, in his hands and in his head. Like, he just knew tobacco. He took Nicaraguan tobacco and did something to it. With the same tobacco, he made me samples that I didn't like. He, out of a conversation of what I did like, he instantly rolled me a new cigar that I was like, holy shit, there it is. Like, he knew exactly from the conversation, like, oh, that's easy. I thought you wanted something crazy. Like, no, I want the simplicity.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, simplicity at its finest is when you find something that's so easy and simple that you're like, how is it possible that it can be so good? It's because you didn't do anything to it. You didn't try to manipulate it.
Yeah.
You just let it be its own thing.
Natural, yeah.
So I love that.
That
definitely.
That was your first contact with Pepin, but when is your first time that you went to Cuba? What was your first contact with Cuban cigars?
Well, first contact with Cuban cigars was in the early 90s, obviously, because I was visiting cigar stores in Los Angeles that would always have them somewhere in the back closet, hidden. Yeah. So I was really into that. was able to get exposed to the differences between those, those tobaccos compared to Honduran or Nicaraguan or Dominican tobaccos. And obviously there was something just so different about it. And obviously this is way before Nicaragua evolved to where it is now.
Yeah.
But there was something special about those early days of smoking those Cuban cigars. So eventually in 1998, I got invited to go to Cuba. With a friend of mine who actually, he was his name was Ruben, actually. His name's Ruben. He's still alive. He's still around. He actually was always part of these big celebrity sporting events. And they had these like celebrity sports events where they'd have these competitions against each other. Pros versus Joes type of thing. And they would always have these events like in the Bahamas and places like that. He won a trip for two to Cuba, and it was actually a group trip of like supposed to be 8 people. And it was one of those things where the guy that was supposed to go with him kind of bowed out last minute. He asked me, I was like, hell yeah. Like,
yeah,
absolutely. So we got, and he's like, there's nobody I would want to visit Cuba with more, because even though you've never been here, where all the factories are, what the factories are, what they produce. He goes, so I want to follow you around, and we're going to go and smoke the best cigars of our lives. And we had an amazing time. We got to meet some old custom Cuban rollers. A couple of them are passed away. It was always, and even back then, it was always buying, something homemade by someone instead of buying something from the factory. So I was always into it. So that was my first experience with going to the island. And then in 2001, I went again with a buddy of mine. And I didn't go back until 2007. And when I went back in 2007, it was with the family to their hometown in the center of the island. Wow. And the funniest part about the trip is that I had to go through Costa Rica illegally, obviously. Really? I had to go through Costa Rica on, I think it was Taka Airlines or something like that. And then from Costa Rica to Havana. And Jaime and his father-in-law picked me up at the airport. And I figured they were going to give me a Cuban cigar to smoke. They literally gave me a box of my own cigars. I was like, Jaime handed me a box of Cojo 03s. I go, I didn't expect to smoke this here, but okay.
And he said, only the best.
So that was an amazing trip, because I got to see a different side of Cuba I never saw. I only saw Havana before, which everybody talks about Havana and Schlitzie, and it's the thing. And there are parts of Havana that still look really nice, and there are parts of Havana that are horribly run down. And it's sad, because beautiful buildings, what a historic city, right?
Yeah, incredible.
Going into the center of the island, you see, small towns, and very beautiful small towns that are starting to, obviously depreciate also, but built, a long time ago, and they had this thing about them. I don't know what it is. It's just a warm feeling. And I immersed myself into that, because I was taking showers with cold water, not cold water out of a shower head. I was literally, it wasn't cold water, because they would take a kind of like, it looks like a heating iron. They would shove it in a bucket of water. And then you would have a cup, and you would take a shower with a cup of water.
Wow. Classic.
And I didn't care. I was in the middle of the island. No one could call me. No one could tell me what to do. Serenity, no cell phone service. I would sit on the stoop of the front of the house and watch kids play baseball. It was amazing. Yeah. And I was only there for 3 days, but it was probably one of the most perfect trips ever. And that's kind of where I came up with the whole Black Label, original Black Label line, because there was an old man that literally gave me a cigar. He recognized me from the night before. I had just taken a shower. with the bucket of water. I went out to the front of the house. I wasn't smoking. I was just kind of sitting there taking in the sun and being at peace. And this old man wearing green military pants, a guayabera, and like a Panama style hat on his Schwinn or whatever type of bicycle. And he had a few like homemade cigars in his pocket, and he gave me one. And I lit it up, and I sat there and I smoked that cigar. And I went to the back of the house, and Pepin saw me smoking that cigar, and he goes, "You like those styles of cigars?" I said, "Yeah, I love stuff like this." I go, "Because there's more care in it, because they made them for themselves." And he started sending me around the neighborhood to like houses to get cigars from his friends.
Oh my God.
He's like, "Just knock on the door at this house and tell them Pepin sent you." Obviously, I couldn't speak Spanish, so I had to go with someone that spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
What a dream trip.
And they would be like this. Hold on, they come back with a handful of cigars, and they're all like, little petite Coronas and Panatellas, so like small cigars.
Okay.
But there was something so real about them and genuine. So that's when I went back to Nicaragua and I said, I need to have, like, I know I make these cigars all for me, but they're labeled for the market, but I need to make a cigar that is truly for me. And that's how the Black Label Corona Gorda came up.
Oh, the Corona Gorda. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it had a covered foot. It had a Fuma head, everything about it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because that's like that's the cap is like a nipple. Nipple cap. That's from there. That's from, like, that was the thing that you saw in Cuba. Or...
Well, yeah, I mean, Fuma heads, that's an old thing, obviously. That's like, it's kind of a simple way to roll the end of the cigar, just kind of bunch it up and twist it.
Okay.
In the case of the Fuma head that we do on the Black Label, it's actually a little tougher, because not only do you have to do all that work to get that little nipple on the head of the cigar, but then you have to triple cap it. Yeah. So it's actually a lot of work.
Yeah.
So in the factory, when I tell Jaime that I want a Fuma head, he usually looks at me and goes, "I'm going to charge you more, because that's a harder head to make than just a traditional, triple cap."
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though it looks more rustic, it's actually harder to make.
Yeah. God, that's really, really cool. So it was always homemade stuff then. Like, did you ever have like a favorite regular release Cuban or?
Yeah, I was always a Diplo 2 fan.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah.
H. Upman number 2s, Bolivar Bellicoso Finos in the cabinet.
All the figurados then.
Yeah, but not always. The Havana Cazador, well, I call it the Havana Cazador, but the Romeo Cazador was always like, that was the cigar that I loved. But it was, when I was searching for boxes when I was younger, they'd always have to be really just like dark and chocolatey. I love the foil paper, so that's where the foil paper inspiration comes from too.
Classic,
so if you see the stuff that I do with foil paper, it's because of Romeo Cazadores.
Yeah, cool. And there's a specific roller there in Cuba, right? That did that style that you visited.
Well, there was Enrique Mon used to do that a lot with his cigars, but there was a guy by the name of Rodolfo Taboada.
Rodolfo, right? Yeah.
Rodolfo Taboada was the roller. By the time I saw him in Cuba, he was working at the Partagas factory. He was the show roller. So he was a Havana famous, right? Mm-hmm. He was the guy in the front in the gift store or the store of the factory where they would sell cigars. And I walked up to him one day and I said, "What's your name?" And he told me his name. I was like, "You're the guy." Like I knew his cigars already because my friends had them in the United States. I go, "Shit, you're the guy." And I had him roll me 2 bundles of a cigar that doesn't exist. And even the factory head looked at me funny and like, "How do you know about that cigar?" And it was a simple Robusto, but it was a particular blend. And it was the Floridacano Short Churchill, which if you ever got Floridacano Short Churchills from like those early days, like even late 80s, early 90s, they were usually made for like executives or sheiks or princes and whatever.
Damn.
Only people that asked for them. And he looked at me and said, "How do you know about that?" And I said, "I actually had like 35 bundles at one time."
Whoa. Damn.
A buddy of mine came up to me shortly after the trip, and I had smoked most of them. And he goes, "You ever hear of a cigar called Floridacano Short Churchill?" I go, "Yeah." I went to my locker at the Grand Havana room, and I came back with 2 cigars, one for me and one for him. He goes, "What's this?" I go, "It's a Florida Connoisseur Churchill." He goes, "How did you get this?" I go, "I had it made in Havana."
By Rodolfo.
And he looked at me, he goes, "Do you know how much these cigars are selling for in Hong Kong?" I go, "No." He goes, $4,000 a bundle.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, wow. Like I looked at him, I said, "Can you give me the cigar back?"
Yeah.
There's a Vitola de Galera that's called Rodolfo. I wonder if that's named after him, like a Cuban one.
Probably not. That's you're talking about Vegueros?
No, like
brand?
there's like an actual Vitola de Galera. It's a 58 by 180.
Oh,
called Rodolfo, which I remember seeing it, and I searched it up now on Cuban Cigar website, and there.
I don't know. Yeah, he was. You know what his most popular cigar that he would roll that we would always see up in the United States were 109s.
Oh,
those are what nice. What do they call them?
They're like half figurados almost. Yeah.
No, yeah, but what's the factory name? Now I'm blanking. I usually know all this shit. It was called a Lusitania, but it wasn't what we think about Partagas Lusitania, but the size was called a Lusitania.
Okay.
And it was the 109 in the Partagas 150 box that you'd see. So he'd always make 109 sizes, and a lot of times they were with covered feet, which was another thing that I took from that whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff that I do is definitely based off of Cuban customs. Even in regular production for us, there are things that are paying homage to that Cuban custom. Again, don't forget the past. Just take it to a different place.
Yeah, you're honoring Cuban like cigar history more than Habanos themselves almost. I really like that.
You know what it is? I'm just a nerd for it. I mean, I was probably a bigger nerd for it, but I still geek out talking about it because I still like. Well, I talked about this on another show recently, and I was laughing because when I did the Grand Kohonu, 6.5 by 60, I put a covered foot on it. It still has a covered foot. But when Cigar Aficionado first reviewed it, they actually reviewed it a very low rating. Like I think it was like 85 points or something.
Damn.
And they said the wrapper is too long for the cigar. And I just started cracking up. I'm like, because it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't know what a closed foot was.
I don't think they really, I don't think they, again, regular production product, they didn't have closed feet. That was a thing for, hand rolls or custom rolls that you'd get. So you wouldn't see production cigars with closed feet. So that was something I paid attention to. And I haven't changed that cigar once since we started it. So it's great that it's now one of our biggest selling cigars.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah. So I think we'll let you go there. You've been more than generous with your time. This has been
absolutely
such a good chat.
I had a great time. And I love the fact that you asked questions about stuff that I don't really talk about. So it's actually kind of nice.
Okay, last question then. Who do you have winning the Super Bowl?
before I answer that question though, I think this is probably why you told me that Aaron kept on talking and talking, because you guys are easy to talk to.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Super Bowl. It's still too early.
Yeah.
But
I have my pick.
I have people around me that obviously I'm a Brady fan. So and I'm a Gronk fan. So I would want to see the Bucks
I
go. One of my father's sales reps that works with my wife, someone that I've become very close friends with. We travel together too. Like we go on couples traveling together. Like we were in Italy in August together. So,
nice.
Their next door neighbor is one of the Gronkowski family members.
Oh, wow.
So
man,
so they become really friendly with the Gronks, and the whole thing is that they want the Bills and the Bucks to go to the Super Bowl.
Okay.
And it's funny because my house in Los Angeles actually is within, 3 miles of the stadium. So it'd be easy access to the game.
Not bad.
So yeah, for selfish reasons, we want those two teams to go because there's potentially some tickets that are going to be set aside.
Fingers crossed then.
But I don't know. I think it's still too early. I mean, there's great teams. Like the Rams are playing like crazy, even though I don't like them.
They steamrolled the Cardinals.
Patrick Mahomes is always an amazing player. You can't take anything away from that kid. That kid's going to find a way to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say. Who's your pick? I'm curious.
I actually had the Bills.
Really? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so Richie from my father, he'll be happy that you said
that. Yeah. No, but I think so. Just after like their latest impressive performance, and with Josh Allen, Diggs, and Singletary, it's just a triple threat that is it's just so explosive. So yeah, I think they'll manage to go to the Super Bowl.
You guys watch a lot of football over in Sweden?
Yeah.
Generally, like in Sweden, not. But we do certainly.
Yeah.
Ruben is a Cowboys fan, so maybe we should get off the topic.
Yeah, I was like, are you gonna put that out there, Carl?
That's great. Yeah, the Cowboys.
Yeah.
America's and Sweden's team, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Packers might do well. We'll see. They have a bye, but Aaron Rodgers chokes.
We were talking about how they choke in the playoffs. So
I think, you never know though, because I think guys like Brady have always said you can wake up any day and just have a shitty day.
Yeah,
and someone will beat you. So I don't think.
Yeah, no,
I don't think there's any safe bet.
Definitely not.
Like I think they're all playing really well. They're all in playoff mode.
Yeah.
Especially the teams that won this last weekend, they won by huge numbers.
Yeah.
I think maybe the bye for the Packers might have a problem. The fact that they didn't play, maybe that's where they get into trouble. So
yeah,
true. Yeah. I hope our listeners that came here to hear about cigar stories enjoyed those last few minutes there.
Right.
Thank you so much, Pete. Once again, this has been an absolute blast. I forgot we were recording a podcast for a while there. It was just so much fun.
No, don't worry.
Yeah, definitely. Great to hear.
As long as I didn't say anything dumb, we're good.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, guys. The interview with Pete Johnson that we were looking forward to so much. I mean, what a guy. He is so chill the entire time. Just like you said during the podcast live, we forgot pretty much that we were even recording it, just having such a natural flowing conversation with the guy. So yeah,
spectacular talk. It was really cool to nerd out about some more I guess detailed nerdy, I guess is the right word, answers, and getting into some non-cigar stuff was really cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, most importantly, because this was just a blast. So yeah, thank you guys so much as always for listening, tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.